Shatter your comfort. Let every constructed poise collapse. You stand before a mirror, its surface misted with the breath of uncertainty, and you feel the tremor of your own heartbeat echoing like a war drum in a silent cathedral. You wear a mask of vulnerability, translucent yet impenetrable, as if you've woven your own fragility into a gleaming facade. You believe weakness is your confession, yet it conceals something darker, an unspoken confession of power unclaimed. You think you crave safety, the soft cushion of familiarity, the gentle lull of approval. But safety is an illusion forged by your deepest dread, the terror of unveiling yourself. Nietzsche whispered that what is essential is often hidden like the root system beneath a towering oak. Your vulnerability mask is that root, spreading unseen, entwined with every choice you make. Sometimes it glimmers with righteous tears, other times it glows with self-pity's dim flame. Yet within that glow, a paradox emerges. What shields you can also imprison you. Picture a grand abandoned ballroom, drenched in moonlight. Dust motes dance like lost souls in the corners. You alone at the center lift your arms as if in surrender, but surrender is no refuge. It is a stage for the mask's final performance. Your eyes seek connection, yet they deliver a silent plea, a harrowing exhibition of impotence that evokes empathy and belittles your own agency. Friends see the tremor in your voice, the quiver of your lips, and they rush forward with gentle words as though you are a wounded bird needing shelter. But every word of comfort deepens your attachment to the very facade you long to escape. This mask of vulnerability, worn so effortlessly, was shaped by 1,000 small betrayals, your own and others. A childhood glance that sneered at your timid heartbeat, an intimate confession met with casual dismissal, the echo of a parent's hollow praise that rang more like a guillotine than a caress. In every instance you fanned the mask's glow until it became a beacon, pulling compassion toward you like moths to a dying flame. You leaned into it, felt its rotten warmth, and convinced yourself that without it you would be erased. Yet Nietzsche dared you to look deeper. He spoke of the will to power, the creative force that surges inside you seeking expression. What if your mask of weakness is simply the chrysalis of hidden strengths? What if vulnerability is not your confession but your crucible? A searing trial that purifies your will to power into something luminous, something unstoppable. You wonder, can weakness be the portal to your greatest power? Does trembling hands conceal the steel of your spirit? Behind every tear you shed is there a sculpted resolve waiting to rise fierce and unyielding? The paradox cuts like a shard of obsidian. Your mask both hides you and defines you. It is your prison and your chrysalis. You cannot tear it away without fracturing the self you have known by its glow. Look down at your hands. They are quivering vessels, vessels that have held both despair and desire. Can you feel the energy pulsing beneath your skin, the raw potential coiled like a spring? The question burns in your mind, blistering like contact with heated iron. Why do you let your mask betray you? Why do you submit to its enticing deceit? What awaits you when you finally tear away this mask and stand unshielded before your own power? You've carried this mask of vulnerability into every room you enter, as though it were woven into your very flesh. But why did you first fashion it? Pause and listen to the quiet current of voices that shaped you, the hushed admonishments that whispered, "Don't rock the boat," the sharp retorts that branded your honesty as too much. You were taught that strength must wear a suit of stoicism, that emotion was a contagion to be quarantined. From childhood's playground to corporate corridors, you learned the same lesson: reveal weakness, and you surrender your bargaining power. Carl Jung described the shadow as that hidden part of the psyche repressed by the conscious mind, an abyss where unwelcome traits reside waiting to erupt in dreams or projections. Your mask of vulnerability is both a shadow and a spotlight. It reveals what you believe will earn you compassion while concealing the darker depths of your ambition, pride, and fear. Perhaps you convinced yourself that weakness was a confession of authenticity. Yet authenticity without boundaries can become performative, a scripted display choreographed for the gaze of others. Nietzsche argued that ressentiment arises when you cannot act on resentment, so you invert values and glorify your inability to strike back. In many circles, society has romanticized vulnerability, praising those who own their pain with tearful speeches on social media. But is this true liberation or a new form of constraint? When you boast of your wounds, do you heal them, or do you anchor your identity more firmly to past hurts? Your vulnerability mask becomes both badge of honor and ball and chain. Viktor Frankl, observing prisoners in Nazi camps, noted that purpose is the antidote to suffering. Yet your mask often obscures purpose under streams of poignant confessions. You sought meaning in your wounds, crafting narratives that spun around betrayal, abandonment, failure. In journals and late-night monologues, you poured out pain in lyrical prose, and in doing so, you etched your identity into every lament. Each retelling cemented your role as the wounded protagonist, preventing you from stepping into the shoes of the survivor, the creator, the one who transforms despair into art. Consider the cultural roots of this mask. In collectivist societies, harmony is prized over confrontation, your ancestors silencing anger to preserve family honor and burying grief beneath polite smiles. In individualist cultures, therapy became the gospel: excavate trauma, nurture your inner child, display scars as proof of progress. Both prescriptions share a delusion that vulnerability alone is the cure rather than the starting point. You learn to equate visibility of pain with moral worth, believing empathy arrives only when you bleed openly. Psychologists at Harvard have identified the crying shame phenomenon. People who frequently display tears are perceived as weak and less competent, even when their tears are authentic expressions of emotion. When you flash your vulnerability mask, you may gain momentary sympathy, but you also risk being written off as incapable, surrendering authority over your narrative to observers who interpret your tears through their own biases. Look inward, and you may find that the mask's seams trace back to a single pivotal moment: the look in a parent's eyes when you fell apart, the laughter that followed your confession, the teacher's impatience when you cried. That moment forged a truth you've been living ever since. Vulnerability invites either rescue or rejection, never indifference. So you cling to the mask, fearing anonymity more than judgment. Yet this mask is not your fault. It is an artifact of layered histories, cultural scripts, and evolutionary survival strategies. Primates signal distress to solicit care. Infants cry to attract guardians. But you are no longer a helpless infant. You are a mind capable of reflection, self-authoring, and transformation. The question is not why you wear the mask that is history, but why you continue to let it define you. What hidden convictions keep you bound to this fragile armor? You feel it in the hollow of your chest, a cold, persistent ache that lingers long after the wound should have healed. That ache is not an abstract malaise, but a living consequence of the mask you've worn so faithfully. Every time you slip into vulnerability's guise, you trade clarity for comfort, truth for temporary relief. You may think you're safe behind your trembling facade, but in reality, you're carving canals of pain that flood your present and taint your future. Imagine water creeping into a levee's foundation, eroding from below, until the ground gives way and the whole structure collapses in an instant. This is how your emotional world behaves. A single disclosure tears on a video call, a raw confession in a therapy session seems minor. Yet each leak widens the fracture, inviting expectations you cannot satisfy and judgments you cannot escape. Friends and strangers alike begin to treat you as someone defined by fragility. They tiptoe around you, unsure how to engage without triggering fresh tears. Colleagues doubt your resilience under pressure. Even your own self-image warps under the weight of persistent sorrow. You ask yourself, why do I feel more trapped after sharing my pain than before? Because every revelation echoes back at you like a distorted reflection. Neuroscientist Matthew Lieberman found that social pain activates the same neural pathways as physical pain. Your brain cannot distinguish between a broken heart and a broken limb. When you broadcast vulnerability, you fire those painful circuits repeatedly, reinforcing neural loops that prioritize distress over discovery. You become conditioned to anticipate hurt, so you cling tighter to the mask that once felt protective. Look around your relationships, and you'll see the unseen toll. The well-meaning friend who once laughed with you now approaches with hesitancy, as if you might shatter at any moment. The partner who cherished your strength begins to question your capacity for growth. Every interaction carries the invisible question: which version of you am I dealing with today? The fragile you or the fierce you? Consider Maria, a client who shared her childhood traumas so openly on social media that hundreds of strangers sent messages of solace. At first, the flood of empathy felt like life rafts, but soon critiques arrived. You're attention-seeking. You're not actually healing. You're stuck in victimhood. The applause turned to whispers of shame. Maria felt betrayed by the kindness that had lured her. She became hyper-aware of every emotion, afraid to express joy lest it feel disingenuous. Her mask, once lifted with hope, morphed into a full-time burden. But it's not just your inner circle that suffers. Your physical health bears the load too. Chronic stress from unresolved emotions accelerates inflammation, weakens immune response, and disrupts sleep. You lie awake, replaying confessions at 3 a.m., the same words like mantras you cannot forget. Your body learns to live in a state of low-grade alarm. Adrenaline spikes become your midnight companions, cortisol your uninvited roommate. The mask promised vulnerability would ease your burden, yet you find yourself more exhausted, more burned out, more hollow than when you first donned it. Culturally, the effects ripple outward. When leaders in business or politics publicly display incessant remorse or self-doubt, constituents grow wary. They wonder, is this person too fragile to make decisions? In a world that demands decisiveness, vulnerability becomes a liability. You've witnessed brand crises where CEOs issued tearful apologies for missteps only to see share prices plummet and trust erode further. Their vulnerability mask, intended to rebuild bridges, instead collapsed under its own weight. Even art and media perpetuate the hidden consequences. Think of the tragic poets and novelists who romanticize suffering only to wither under its lure. Sylvia Plath's confessional verses enthralled readers, but at the cost of her own life. You may feel inspired by raw confession, yet you're unaware of the silent bleed it can inflict on your spirit. The more the world demands realness, the more you bleed into your mask until the mask is all that remains. And what of your own inner dialogue? It's a running commentary of shame and self-judgment. You chastise yourself. You're too emotional. You need to toughen up. You're failing at healing if you still cry. Each self-rebuke is a shovelful of dirt thrown on your buried confidence, making it harder to unearth. You tell yourself vulnerability is your truth, but your truth has become a narrow path lined with echoes of past despair. This shadowy consequence culminates in a single crushing realization: you cannot keep living this way. The mask you believed protected you has become your shackle. Every moment of relief is borrowed time, every confession a down payment on future sorrow. You start to question, is there a way out of this maze of self-inflicted pain? Can you dismantle the mask without losing your identity altogether? Your heart races at the thought. You feel the ground shift beneath you as if something ancient is stirring inside, a longing for authenticity that isn't defined by tears or tremors. You recognize that vulnerability need not be a trap, but as long as you cling to the mask, you'll never know. The mask has served its purpose, now it's time to face the cost. And so you stand at the edge of an abyss, the wind howling around you with voices of doubt and expectation. On one side lies the safety of your familiar mask, on the other, the uncharted territory of unmasked power. You feel the tremor of fear and the spark of something bolder, perhaps courage, perhaps recklessness. The choice looms. Which path will you take when the mask finally crumbles? Then you stand and roar against the silence. You feel the tremor under your feet, the quiet storm of rebellion rising in your veins. It begins not with timid apologies, but with a defiant choice to treat vulnerability, not as confession, but as catalyst. You refuse to kneel before your own pity. Instead, you turn the mask inside out, exposing its seams and stitching, so you can learn its language and rewrite its code. First, you detach confession from identity. You will no longer announce your fragility as if it were your sole truth. When tears well up, you witness them like an observer asking, "What message do you carry? What signal am I refusing to hear?" You don't recoil or recite old mantras. You lean in curious and alert. In that moment you reclaim power, for power lies in choice. You choose awareness over immersion. Next, you carve out a sanctuary for feeling one without spectacle. You set aside the stage of social media, the echo chamber of compassion, and create a private altar where raw emotion can surface in meditative silence. You light a candle not to draw attention, but to honor the flame of consciousness within you. Jung called this process active imagination, a sacred dialogue between self and shadow. You invite your pain to speak, not to be applauded, but to be heard, understood, and granted passage into transformation. Then you redefine strength. Nietzsche celebrated amor fati, the love of fate. You cultivate an embrace of your history scars and all as the forge that tempered your will. You stop apologizing for being broken. Instead, you baptize your wounds in purpose. You ask, how can this fracture become the crucible for my next creation? You plant the shards in fertile ground and watch new shoots of resilience spring forth. You also challenge cultural scripts. You gather with allies who refuse to worship vulnerability as virtue. You form a circle where confession meets accountability. In this enclave, you share not to solicit rescue, but to practice clarity. You report, "Yesterday I felt paralyzed by doubt," and your comrade replies, "What action can you take right now to break its hold?" You replace sympathetic nods with incisive questions. You replace pity with partnership in growth. In your own mind, you install a new protocol, the pause. When anxiety lobs its grenade, you catch it mid-air. You label it fear of inadequacy, fear of rejection, and then you choose a counter-response. You speak to yourself. "I have survived every breakdown before this. I have untangled every knot of shame. I will survive this too." Each pause strengthens the prefrontal cortex, the seat of reason dimming the amygdala's alarm. You train yourself to respond, not react. You also tap into the collective wisdom of thinkers who refuse to be defined by weakness. You imagine Viktor Frankl in a barracks finding meaning in suffering. You ask, what purpose does this trial serve in my narrative? You channel Nietzsche's Zarathustra, who danced on the precipice of despair only to proclaim, "You must become who you are." You summon the courage of a Jungian hero diving into the shadow's depths to rescue a forgotten self. Then you act. You create your own rites of passage. You write a letter to the part of yourself that still clings to tears like currency. "I honor you, but I choose growth." You burn that letter in a ceremony flame, licking the edges as your voice echoes primal defiance. Or you stand in the open air and recite a new oath. "I will wield my vulnerability not as a plea for mercy, but as a tool for creation." The wind carries your words into the night, dispersing the mask's ashes. You rewire your neural pathways by pursuing small wins. Each time you share pain without expecting rescue, each time you ask for feedback instead of comfort, you score a victory. Your brain records these wins, forging myelin sheaths around new habits of empowerment. Over time, the mask loses its gleam. It grows frayed and thin, and you, reborn from the mask's decay, stand naked in authenticity's light. You watch how your relationships transform. You speak your needs with directness. "I need space to reflect," or "I need honesty, not pity." Others begin to mirror your strength. They ask you tougher questions, propose solutions, and celebrate resilience over remorse. The dynamics shift. Compassion flows not as a river of tears, but as a conduit for action and co-creation. Society begins to sense the change. When leaders apologize, they follow with bold commitments. Brands that once trembled under scandal issue clear restitution plans, not theatrical confessions. And within you, something glorious unfurls. Your heart still beats with tenderness, but it pumps purpose. Your eyes still glisten in quiet moments, but each tear nourishes resolve. Vulnerability has become the iron you forge weapons from the raw material for art, innovation, and fierce compassion. You have not discarded the mask. You have mastered it. You wear it now as an armor of insight, a mirror to your own becoming. It no longer distracts or diminishes. It empowers and clarifies. And you understand at last the rebellion was not against vulnerability itself, but against the idea that weakness defines you. Now you stand at the dawn of a new era within yourself, one where the mask is neither prison nor pedestal, but an instrument of transformation. The rebellion has been won, but the journey stretches onward. You recognize that each day you will choose this path, forging your will anew. What will you create with the power you have reclaimed? You step beyond rebellion's ember into dawn's new light, where vulnerability and power converge into a singular truth. Your deepest wounds are maps to your highest purpose. Throughout history, heroes have carried scars, not as shameful badges, but as glyphs of their journey, each carved line a testament to obstacles overcome, each ache a beacon guiding the next stride. Imagine standing at the edge of a vast canyon at sunrise. Mist rises from the abyss, and far across a solitary peak catches the first golden ray. You realize that your suffering valley and that distant summit are inseparable. Without the hollow carved by pain, you would never glimpse the heights awaiting you. This is the ultimate paradox. Your vulnerability is both chasm and bridge chasm, inviting fall and bridge offering passage. You remember Nietzsche's proclamation, one must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star. Your inner chaos, those tremors of fear, those currents of doubt, have not been impediments, but raw materials. They forged your metaphoric star, waiting to be birthed in acts of courage and creation. Each time you felt powerless, you were gathering stardust in your soul. Carl Jung taught that individuation, becoming who you truly are, is a process of reconciling opposites within. In that journey, vulnerability and strength are not antagonists, but siblings in a family of wholeness. Without the shadow of your fragility, your strength would lack depth. Without the light of your resilience, your vulnerability would remain a blind spot. Together they form the full spectrum of your being. You envision your life as a grand tapestry. Threads of vulnerability, silken, translucent, interlace with strands of power, thick and lustrous. At first glance, the silken threads seem fragile, ready to snap. Yet under the weaver's hand, they give the tapestry luminosity, revealing patterns that bold threads alone could never create. Your life's masterpiece demands both textures. Now consider the world you will shape when you harness this unity. You will speak truths that resonate not because they are loud, but because they come from a place unguarded, yet unwavering. Your leadership will inspire not through dominance, but through demonstrated courage to stand when storms rage inward and outward. You will foster cultures where failure is honored as prelude to innovation, where tears are not tokens of defeat, but preludes to understanding. Reflect on Viktor Frankl's insight: even in the darkest human suffering one can find meaning. You no longer seek meaning in the suffering itself, but in your response to it. You transform suffering into service, a mentor guiding others through their own abyss, an artist painting pain into beauty, an advocate sculpting policies that humanize workplaces and communities. Picture the legacy you are crafting. It is not one of unbroken triumphs, but of relentless authenticity. Future generations will trace your influence in leaders unafraid to admit uncertainty, yet committed to decisive action, in artists whose works bear both tenderness and ferocity, in communities that see vulnerability as strength and strength as compassion. Yet the final truth is more elemental. You are not separate from this cosmic dance of weakness and resilience. You are both dancer and stage rhythm and resonance. In every breath you echo the ancient song of becoming, an eternal interplay of breakdowns, birthing breakthroughs of fractures refining form. As you walk forward, the mask you once wore now lies at your feet, not discarded in contempt, but reverently offered as a relic. You neither bury it nor brandish it. You honor it for the lessons it delivered. It becomes a sacred talisman, reminding you that every mask holds both concealment and revelation. And you, the unmasked soul, carry both destiny and doubt in holy tandem. So here at the threshold of your limitless self, you stand not merely recovered, but radically whole, an alchemist who transmutes fragility into force, doubt into direction, wounds into wisdom. This is your ultimate truth. The mask was never meant to hide you from the world, but to guide you back to yourself. And now, unmasked and unbound, you glimpse horizons, not of safety, but of possibility. Will you dare to walk into that boundless horizon with your wounds shining like constellations mapping the way for others to follow? You lift your gaze toward the horizon, where dawn and dusk merge into a single band of iridescent promise. In that threshold space, you recognize a deeper truth. The tension between vulnerability and power is not a conflict to resolve, but a dance to embrace. Every step you take will be guided by the pulse of paradox, soft yet unbreakable, open yet inviolable. Imagine a river carving its path through bedrock over millennia. The water's seeming gentleness belies its unwavering force. It yields and adapts to each curve, yet its will reshapes mountains. Your vulnerability is that river fluid, responsive, alive. Your power is the bedrock, steady, resilient, foundational. Separate them and the river becomes aimless, the rock unmoved. Together they sculpt canyons of possibility. You see this in communities that flourish under courageous openness. In cooperative workplaces, teams share uncertainties not as liabilities but as data signals that steer innovation. Engineers admit, "I don't know how to solve this bug," and peers rally with fresh perspectives. Writers confess, "I'm stuck on this chapter," and editors suggest breakthroughs. Vulnerability here fuels creativity. Power resides in collective uplift. Consider the artist who paints wound and wonder on the same canvas. She lays bare her scars in brush strokes of crimson, yet frames them with bold swaths of light. Viewers gasp at her transparency, then cheer her vision. Her vulnerability invites communion. Her mastery commands respect. She reminds you need not choose between bearing your heart and wielding your skill. Both belong in the same masterpiece. Your own life can mirror this. You will find that when you speak from your wounds tempered by wisdom, your words carry gravity. A confession becomes a proclamation when guided by intention. You might say, "I once believed my tears defined me," and then follow with, "Now I know they illuminate the path forward." In that moment, you transform personal lament into collective anthem. And what of the legacy you inherit and bequeath your ancestors? Endured unimaginable hardship, forging resilience from desperation. Their stories of survival are etched in your DNA. You honor them not by reenacting their suffering, but by elevating their resolve into stories of triumph. On the other side, those who follow will see your mask not as a veil of frailty, but as a canvas of possibility. Children watching you navigate doubts and then soar will learn that falling is a step toward flight. Colleagues witnessing your transparent decision-making will learn that asking questions is as vital as issuing directives. Friends witnessing your balanced self-disclosure will learn that closeness need not cost agency. In your personal narrative, the final chapter need not be written yet. The quill remains in your hand. Each day you awaken to choose how vulnerability and power will converse within you. Pause for a moment and feel the starlight of potential flickering within. You are both cosmos and cartographer, charting territories of thought and feeling unknown to the surface self. Beneath the mask, know within it lies the map to your uncharted strengths. You need only trace its lines with the compass of courage. Every step you take beyond this moment will resonate like ripples on a pond. What begins as a single act of balanced authenticity will spread outward, touching lives you'll never meet. A leader empowered by vulnerability will redefine corporate culture. A parent emboldened by honesty will nurture children who speak their truths. A creative soul fortified by self-knowledge will produce art that uproots cynicism and plants wonder. This is your ultimate truth. Your mask was never enemy, it was guide. It taught you where your wounds lay, where your fears dwell. It revealed the fissures through which light could enter. Now you transform it into a vessel of illumination, carrying both shadow and shine. And as you stand here unmasked yet unashamed, you realize that every ending births a beginning. The mask dissolves not into oblivion, but into luminous threads woven through the tapestry of your life. Those threads bind you to purpose, connection, and the boundless expanse of your becoming. So step into the dawn, carrying both your scars and your stars. Let them light the way for you and for all who follow. The horizon awaits, shimmering with questions and promises alike. What will be the first conscious choice you make in this new chapter of your unmasked life?